Fooly is a beautiful mess. It's bright and colorful and fast-paced while still knowing when to slow down to allow the audience to breathe for a moment. Fooly, usually stylized as FLCL, reached American audiences in 2003 after its initial debut in 2000, which was a period of time that saw the popularity of anime grow among younger American audiences. Fooly created a perfect storm of sorts, one that just happened to occur in the right place at the right time and connecting with a very specific demographic. Hundreds of essays and video essays have been written over the years detailing every single little theme and symbol within Fooly, attempting to give it a deeper meaning. And while it does have much to be said about its underlying themes, people, including myself, do tend to overanalyze it at times. But to the audience it reached at the time, they could have cared less. Fooly was a coming-of-age story focusing on the hardships of adolescence and growing up, but back then, a large majority of kids that were watching were just starting to enter their teenage years. The symbolism and imagery within the show wasn't going to resonate with an average teenager, but it was still engaging to them based primarily on aspects such as visuals and absurdist comedy. As the years went on and the initial audience began to grow up, they often went back to Fooly with a more mature mindset and knowledge of life growing up. This is when it started to resonate. Now, in 2018, after gaining such a large following over the years, Fooly has come back. Fooly Progressive is the most recent season, premiering on the 2nd of June of this year. And Progressive is a testament to the immense popularity it has gained in the States, as Progressive was co-produced by Adult Swim, the network it aired on in the US 15 years ago, and being released in English, with the new season not hitting Japan until September of 2018, the same month that the third season, Fooly Alternative, will be airing in America. But with the return of Fooly, one question still has to be asked. How does it compensate for an older audience? To really get into the meat of the subject, we have to go over a few details in regards to the first season. For those of you that are bored to death about listening to analyses on Fooly and themes, jump to this timestamp. For the rest of us, though, let's get started. Like I said before, it's no secret that Fooly focuses around a lot of the changes in a person's life as they go through adolescence and puberty. It's no stranger to being blunt and obvious with its metaphors in relation to sex, adult ideals, and difficulties of getting older. I mean, that's where the show gets its name from. In all reality, Fooly is just baby talk for sex.
Who's this slut you're fooling around with?
Mamimi, we were down at the river.
Really, Mamimi?
I bet she does it like a weasel. She's cursed, I tell you.
Ah, your brother is away, so she's sinking her fangs into you now, fondling around, fooling around, Fooly. What's Fooly?
How should I know? I'm still in grade school.
But Fooly doesn't just focus on exploring the sexual side of going through puberty. It also takes a look at how our emotional intimacy develops over time as we grow closer to people in our lives. This can be seen especially with the two main characters in Naota and Mamimi. Naota's brother Tasuku had left to go to America in order to play baseball, but that left him alone without a role model anymore. Mamimi, you could argue, was even more devastated by his departure as she was formerly his girlfriend, developing a bond with him after he rescued her from a fire at their elementary school years ago. With the absence of Tasuku, Mamimi started to hang around Naota, using him as a surrogate in place of his brother and giving him the same nickname that she had previously called Tasuku. As the series goes on, Mamimi continuously flip-flops between thinking she has true feelings for Naota and knowing that she's just using him. And another thing of note between them is the definite age gap between the two teenagers, with Naota only being 13 versus Mamimi 17 years of age. Since she constantly clings to Naota, often forcing her feelings onto him regardless of how he feels, Naota becomes even more emotionally conflicted as the series goes on. Even with Naota being upset that his brother left, he still carries around his brother's old baseball bat. However, even though he carries it with him often, he expresses no desire to use it, thus the ongoing theme of Naota refusing to both metaphorically and literally swing the bat. That is, until he receives help from Haruko, who guides him along the way. On the other hand, though, not everything in Fooly is going to have some grandiose meaning behind it. A large majority of visual symbolism that's seen within the show is hollow and empty. Take, for example, the hand above the Medical Mechanica plant. Medical Mechanica is the quote-unquote true antagonist of the series, an organization that Haruko harbors animosity towards as they're fighting for a similar goal. But the hand standing next to the Medical Mechanica building is the remains of one of the several robots from Medical Mechanica we see throughout the series. However, this one is missing its terminal core, causing the hand-like robot to now take on the appearance of a hand with a stigmata. Now, Gainax, the studio responsible for Fooly Cooly, is no stranger to Christian imagery within their past projects. One of their most popular works, Neon Genesis Evangelion, is rife with depictions of Christian symbolism. However, much like in Evangelion, the depiction here is ultimately hollow. See, in Japan, people who are Christian in faith make up less than 1% of the total population. To people in Japan, Christianity is almost equivalent to that of gods of Norse mythology or the Greek pantheon. And while people may argue that there is still some deeper meaning to a lot of Gainax's symbolic work, when asked about the depiction of these images in Evangelion in particular, assistant director Kazuya Suramaki said, quote, "There are a lot of giant robot shows in Japan, and we did want our story to have a religious theme to help distinguish them. Because Christianity is an uncommon religion in Japan, we thought it would be mysterious. None of the staff who worked on Eva are Christians. There is no actual Christian meaning to the show, we just thought the visual symbols of Christianity looked cool. If we had known the show would get distributed in the US and Europe, we might have rethought that choice." End quote. This ideal carries over from work on Evangelion to Fooly Cooly and beyond, with symbolism being incorporated just for the sake of looking cool. In what almost seems like satire of this idea, within the series, Naoto's father ponders if there's a deeper meaning behind having Kanti the robot staying in their house, and discussion of Naoto's father brings up one last point about the original Fooly Cooly run. Throughout the series, we get a glimpse of only a few adults within Mabase, the city that the series takes place in. But every adult seen through Naoto's eyes, he sees as someone who was unable to grow up. The adults in Fooly Cooly often take very childish tones with other characters and are often unable to control their emotions to the point of almost throwing a tantrum. Naoto wants to be an adult, but looking around himself, he only sees adults that don't act like it. This almost forces Naoto and his friends into being more mature at times. One of his friends, Eri Ninamori, is the daughter of the mayor of Mabase, who, despite knowing of her father's affair with his secretary, tries to live her own life without being caught up in the middle of her parents' issues. And I could continue on, listing all the little details and images that you can see within the series that has a deeper meaning behind it, but if I did, we would be here forever. Fooly Cooly Progressive takes us back to Mabase, some years later after the events of the first season. This time, it focuses on Hidomi Hibajiri, a 14-year-old girl that gets wrapped up in Haruko's scheme with her classmates. Progressive certainly isn't as erratic as the first season of the show, keeping a usually consistent style and not as fast-paced as the story goes on. But I believe there's a good reason for this. As I stated before, a large part of the people who first watched Fooly Cooly were adolescents, with short attention spans and not worried about the deeper meaning of things. This is why Fooly Cooly first appealed to many all those years ago. It was visually interesting to watch and take in as an experience. Now, these teenagers have grown up into young adults with a more mature mindset and willingness to pay attention. This change is why Progressive paces itself more casually. It knows that to returning viewers, if it tried to keep the same fast-paced style of the first season, it may simply come across as annoying and lose viewers as a result. This doesn't mean that the series doesn't keep a similar sense of humor or tone, but it calms itself down just enough to be comprehensible and hold the audience interest without pandering to them. While the original season focused around adolescence, Progressive seems to do the same thing, but it takes more of a slice-of-life approach. Hibajiri certainly keeps Naoto's cynicism and dull outlook on how life has become in Mabase, keeping the same sentiment that nothing interesting ever happens within her town. However, she addresses a new aspect of growing up. She is almost always seen wearing her headphones wherever she goes, whether it be in school or sleeping, and she does this for a very specific reason, so people won't bother her. Growing up, it's not uncommon to become so conflicted with our own emotions that we just don't want to be bothered by anybody at times. Hibajiri wears these headphones because she assumes nothing interesting will ever happen, so there's no point in people thinking she's actually paying attention, when in reality, she's one of the only people, aside from Ide, that is aware of the strange occurrences going on within Mabase. The headphones giving her the inability to talk to anybody, this also prevents her from opening up emotionally to other people and actually starting conversations with others. The headphones also have a more practical approach as well, seeing as they were designed by Medical Mechanica in order to prevent Haruko from being able to brainwash her. These two ideas come together near the middle of the second episode when Haruko, who's become the teacher in Hidomi's class, gives the students a scrapbook to look through. As the students flip through it, Hibajiri could seem less interested before the pictures become more and more impractical. With her interest piqued, Hidomi takes a look at the scrapbook, only to find that the pictures the students are fawning over are nothing more than crude crayon drawings by Haruko. The headphones later come into play again as Haruko tries to have them removed. As a security measure, the headphones attach themselves to Hidomi's head, but as a side effect, this brings out her subconscious personality. Up until that point, we had only heard her subconscious in the beginning of each episode as it narrated her dreams. Progressive also takes a look at the societal pressure on a teenager's mind. In the first episode, this is presented satirically, with Haruko ranting on about how useless teenagers are in today's world. Along with keeping similar themes, Progressive holds the same empty symbolism that we talked about before, the most blatant example being that of Kanti being tied up on a cross within Commander Amaro's headquarters for no discernible reason other than to bring back that Christian imagery. I've seen people complaining that Progressive isn't Fooly Cooly, or that it ruined Fooly Cooly for them, and if that's what you want to believe, that's your decision. But personally, I think Progressive is much more than just a new season of Fooly Cooly. It has a new outlook on the themes of the past. It gives us a perspective of adolescence through different eyes. No one person's experience growing up is going to be the exact same as another, and that can be all the more apparent with Progressive. And while Progressive still hasn't finished airing yet, I believe that it can only get better with time. However, before Progressive even began airing, the first episode of the third season, Fooly Cooly Alternative, aired on Adult Swim on April Fool's Day with English subtitles, so I think it's only fair to take a quick look at Alternative. There's not a whole lot to decipher now without the context from other episodes, but Alternative seems to slow down even more. Alternative's main character is a 17-year-old high school girl, the oldest protagonist in the series so far. To compensate for this, the episode doesn't seem to hold the same mindset as the previous two seasons. Rather than focusing on adolescence and puberty, from what we've seen, Alternative is likely to take a focus on what happens as we fully grow up into young adults. When encountering our main character for the first time, Haruko tells her that, quote, "You seem kinda tangled, muddled. Maybe you think every day will be the same forever. 17 won't wait for you." End quote. Kana doesn't understand this at first, but by the end of the episode she remarks how her friends and her both probably realized what it meant at the same time. Kana and her friends all realize that they need to make the most of the time that they have together. While it's a bit difficult to completely discern the underlying themes of Alternative quite yet, or judge it without seeing more episodes, it seems to be going down the right track. From Fooly Cooly to Progressive and Alternative, we see a growing understanding of what it's like to grow up. What it was like for us to grow up. Instead of viewing Progressive and Alternative as something different than the Fooly Cooly you grew up with, imagine it as the Fooly Cooly that grew up with you. It's become more nuanced, more subtle, in order to connect with its audience who's gotten older over the years. It isn't just another comedy or surrealist anime. It's one that can legitimately connect with you on a personal basis. Fooly Cooly is a progressive alternative.